Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Fire away.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Visiting Speaker Series here at Microsoft Research. I'm so pleased that you were able to join us this afternoon. Our speaker today is, of course, Geoffrey Moore, who's a venture capitalist, a PhD in literature, yay, and many other things. He's written incredible books, which I'm sure you have well-thumbed copies of, both Crossing the Chasm and Inside the Tornado. He's written a fascinating book called Dealing with Darwin, How Great Companies Innovate in Every Phase of Their Evolution. Perhaps a topic that we might be interested in here at Microsoft. And I'm just so glad that he was able to make the time to come and chat with us this afternoon. Please help me welcome Geoffrey Moore.
So I do have some slides to share, but I would love to be interrupted at any point. So this is sort of, and if your crap detector goes off, let's go up quickly. Hello, and we'll just see where it goes. Okay, let me see where I am here. Okay, so the agenda, innovation and what's new. I think there's three things I just want to put on the table. One is, I think the imperatives to innovate have always been the same. They're essentially Darwinian, but I want to kind of push at how that become more urgent in recent months, if it were. I want to talk a little bit about return on innovation, because I think we tend to idealize and romanticize innovation in our culture, and you don't want to innovate unless you get a return for it. So I want to talk about how you get a return on innovation. And then most importantly, what kind of tees up the rest of the talk is the impact of maturing categories in tech. We've had a prolonged adolescence, but it's over. And which is kind of frankly slightly poignant, so therefore, where do you go from here? And it isn't that you stop being young, but there's a broader range of possibilities, and that's where these 12 innovation types come from. And I'm actually going to spend a fair amount of time on that. No one type is going to startle you. You're not going to go, oh my God, the magic type I'd never thought of. I think the more important thought is that there's a portfolio of types, and that you should make a conscious decision about what type of innovation you're using, and it ought to be a disciplined decision, not just a random decision or a personal preference decision only. And then some key takeaways: how do people get off track, and then how one could use these models to succeed. And we have about, how much time do we have roughly?
Half hour, 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Okay, fair enough. Okay, good enough. Okay, great. So, why Darwin? Free markets are it's a natural selection system, right? The only thing that's weird is that we're starting to get selected against instead of selected for. I spent my entire life playing home games. I mean, the U.S. market was the most privileged place to be. We had the best capital, we had the best education, we had the most homogeneous market. It was all to the good. You tend to get used to that. You tend to get fat and happy and kind of entitled. Witness the airlines industry, witness the telecommunications industry, et cetera, et cetera. Darwin does not acknowledge entitlements. Okay, that's just the key thing. So right now you look and say, where's the economic advantage going in this century? It's clearly going across the Pacific. It will be in Asia. We'll try to be a smarter Europe. That's about kind of the best game you could sort of think about us trying to play. The cappuccinos should be, and Seattle has led the way with the coffee, so I think we can get there. But our economic advantages are getting marginalized, and this is a very expensive lifestyle that we enjoy. It requires margins. So how do we make that work? And how will we deal with it? And the deal is, we're either going to evolve or get marginalized, and Darwin doesn't care. Just doesn't care. It's okay. So how would you play that game? Well, the first piece of the game is to say, I need a model about innovation, because, as I said, we tend to idealize innovation in our culture, largely because we see it as a source of differentiation. And when innovation differentiates in a way that causes a customer to buy your product and not the other guy's product, that's the score. That's what we want, right? Now, a second outcome isn't quite as exciting, but it's very important. That's when the other guy out-innovated you, and you need to catch up, right? So you neutralize Netscape. You're in the process of seeking to neutralize Google. You're not going to out-Google Google or out-Netscape. You're just going to take their differentiation off the table again. Okay? That's the object of the second one. And the third one is, it has nothing to do with my competitive footprint. I'm just going to do this in a way that's cheaper, smarter, faster, so I'll have more resources to use elsewhere going forward. Those are the three good outcomes of innovation. The fourth outcome is waste. I think it's actually too small a part of the pie chart. And the reason I do is because waste is innovation projects that fail to create definitive separation, fail to neutralize. Usually they were trying to be blue, but they weren't gutsy enough. They didn't go far enough. So what happened was you got your innovation out there, but so did the other guy, or got something out there close enough that net, neither of you got paid. Okay? HP, IBM, and Compaq played this game against each other for a decade, and only Dell got paid. Because only Dell had an innovation type that was different from the other three going forward. So it's important as you're thinking about the innovations you're working on, what is my outcome here, and am I sure it's not green? Blue is probably most exciting, and for MSR I would say blue is the point, right? But red, you might be called on to do red. Probably not here for yellow, but hopefully not green. Okay? So in that model, the second idea about innovation I just want to put up is that we've spent a lot of time locating innovation at the front end of this curve, the category maturity life cycle. I spent about better part of a decade milking the model on the left there, and God bless it, it's been a good model. But you know what? It's kind of, life's moving on, and you know, there's about $500 billion worth of spend that's in the middle of this diagram now. And you see it first in the enterprise. The consumer space still has a fair amount more on the left side of this. That's why everybody's so excited about consumer. But the enterprise is pretty much well in the middle of the C stuff going forward. And consumers moving there as well. And so, you know, we looked at this thing and we said, well, it used to be, you know, with Moore's Law, you would just continually reinvent the front end of this curve and God knows what happens in the back, but who cares, right? Because we'll just do the next thing. And now increasingly it's like, no, we have a lot more legacy and a lot more install base and a lot more commitments in the middle of this diagram. We need to rethink our allocation of resources and our understanding of innovation. And that led to this diagram, which was an attempt to answer a very simple question, which is there any kind of innovation other than disruptive that means anything? And I have a blog, which is sort of ridiculous for a guy my age, but I do have a blog. And there's a guy, and he and I are debating because he wants to say that disruptive innovation is the only real innovation. And that all other innovation is sort of like middle-aged wannabe, right? And I want to say no. If you say that innovation is that which creates differentiation, which creates customer preference for your offer and moves the money to your side of the table, and that is the kind of innovation I'm talking about, then any one of these blocks is a candidate for moving money. And I would encourage you to think about yourself in the job of moving money, okay? Moving resources on the planet toward your offer using one of these techniques. So when you look at this thing, you think, well, that's fine, but that's an awful lot of stuff. And how would you sort that out, other than colors, which PowerPoints are very good at? So the way we sorted it out is we used the value discipline idea, and we said, okay, look, let's talk first of all about innovation types on the left of this diagram. They're optimized for growth markets. Product leadership innovation types are extremely good for growth markets. They're not very good for low growth markets, static markets, because they're expensive and they're risky. And they tend to over-feature a product. If you continue doing product leadership innovation as you move into the middle of this diagram, you end up with over-featured products. Not anything that would ever happen at Microsoft, but at other companies, this has happened, okay? So you want to start substituting customer intimacy and operational excellence as zones of innovation that are more suited to mature markets. And so I want to kind of walk you through that, and then we'll get to the end of this thing. We can have some questions. So innovation types for the product leadership zone. So disruptive innovation, that is the one that Christensen's written about, Innovator's Dilemma, Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado. That's always been about disruptive innovations. Don't think you need to know too much more about that. Application innovation is where you take an established technology and find a new use for it. And product innovation is where you take an established application and do it a lot better. You guys, for a lot of your life, were the world's best at product innovation. Not disruptive innovation and not application innovation, product innovation. You just made it better. It usually took you 3 times, right? So 1.0 was just horrible, and 2.2 was pretty grim, but 3.0, 3.1, okay, so it's pretty good, and then you just wouldn't stop. You would not stop. So local area networks. There was no chance you were going to get local area networks right. Novell had it right. You guys were going to. You no way, right? But you just kept relentlessly doing product innovation until you took it off the table. What has happened now is, and I would argue that's what Google did to Yahoo with search, right? Didn't reinvent search, just did it better. Okay? What happened to you as you were doing that was you got ubiquity, and this was Bill's. I mean, Bill's got lots of things to be a genius about, but probably the thing that he invented that was most powerful was this concept of platform innovation. When he realized that the operating system wasn't an ingredient, it was a platform. And he actually, single-handedly is probably, well, it is too strong a word, but it's not so much a strong a word as you might think. Almost virtually single-handedly invented the PC software industry. I mean, Microsoft made Lotus. Microsoft made MicroPro. They made Ashton Tate, those early database guys in the 80s. Then they took it all away, and so people got kind of cranky. But the fact is, Bill was the guy who Bill and to some degree Andy Grove at Intel figured the model out at a time when nobody else saw it, because IBM never would have given you that ubiquity if they'd known what it could have turned into. Okay, so it was, and in fact, platform innovation requires that you be ubiquitous as a product before you can start to be a platform. Everybody who says I want to be a platform at birth, environments won't let you do that because they know it's too powerful. So they'll let you be a platform for free. So open source, you can be a platform. But as soon as you want to make money, I'm sorry, you can't be a platform because I don't want to pay yet another person on the planet toll, right? So you get ubiquitous, Trojan horse strategy. You get ubiquity as a product, and then you convert to a platform. That's what Cisco's trying to do with its routers now. It's what SAP is trying to do with its ERP systems. Oracle successfully did it with database. So Oracle, you, and Intel were the 3 great platform plays of the first couple of decades of this industry. Google's trying to become a platform. Amazon's trying to become a platform. This whole idea of could I become a platform? And we're becoming very, very sensitive to the platform play because people realize the economic consequences of doing it. I'm not going to spend more time here because I think you guys know this world. The only thing I would just say about this world is you probably, as a high volume play and with the size you're at and the economics of your company now, cannot do application innovation very well. It's the wrong size hole to be digging with your shovel. So you probably should buy your application innovation from others, but you can certainly do the other ones on this list. That said, in the world of Windows, in the world of Office, you're moving into a world which is not here anymore, right? And so now we're getting into the world of either customer intimacy or operational excellence, and most likely both simultaneously. So let's look at the customer intimacy zone. We know this world, you know this world, but not from your own experience at Microsoft. You know this world from your experience as a consumer in our society. And if you look at these innovation types, they're rank ordered. The one at the top is the one closest to the product innovation, and the one at the far side is the one furthest away from the product, most inside the mind of the consumer. And if you look, there's kind of a gradient across the 4 types of innovation, where you're going more and more inside the mind of the consumer as you go forward. That's not a place where you guys have been comfortable, and you have to get there. You must make the journey inside the mind of the consumer. You must develop intellectual property that is distinctively Microsoft, that is about neurons, not just electrons. And I don't know how you're going to do it. I really don't, but you have to. It is the problem statement. Okay? The design methodology, you could. I can remember listening to Ulchin it might have been a year or 2 ago. Talking about, in Windows, he was doing all this segmentation around various psychographic types. And it was Harry, Mary, Gary, Sherry, and Larry. I can't remember who they were called, but it was these folks. And what he was trying to do is he was trying to create design centers for this. Arguably, what Flora's doing in Microsoft Home is an attempt to create some design centers for getting inside the mind of the consumer. But increasingly, as the world becomes more digitized, as more and more of our human experience is experienced digitally, the mental interaction is the value proposition. And it's not the functionality of the product, right? The engineering part of the product, the computer science part of the product never goes away, but the differentiating attribute, the innovation that creates customer preference, is increasingly moving toward down this gradient going forward. And so coming up with mental models for that, coming up with design methodologies for that, coming up with test methodologies for that. So how do you test for a good experience? You know, was it good for you? I mean, this is not a very good test, right? By the way, for those of us who've tried that particular question, it's not a very good question. But the point about this exercise is, you know, there is a gradient here. And by the way, Apple is a very impressive performer there. But Apple doesn't scale, right? Because Steve Jobs doesn't scale. No, really, I mean, Apple, I mean, as soon as Steve goes away, I don't know what will happen, but it doesn't scale, right? It doesn't scale. So figuring out the Microsoft response to this thing, I mean, you guys are smart, right? But this is completely virgin territory for you guys. And you know, the butterfly wasn't it, right? Bob wasn't it, okay? We know you can do this badly, okay? The question is whether you can do it well. And I think you can. I just think you have to set yourself the standard. By the way, one of the things that's going to help is you're going to compete increasingly with online services like Google, who are also going to be playing this game. So the one thing you guys are really good at is like just out-competing somebody. So if you often need a reference competitor to get the engine working right. What they're doing to you, which is scary, but ultimately I think is Darwinian in a positive sense, they're converting everything you sell into something that they give away for free. Right? So you actually make and sell software. They do not. Any stream of electrons that crosses a wire for them is a form of media, and therefore can be given away because it will be monetized through some sort of media model, right? Okay? You guys have to figure out a constructive response to that challenge going forward. And part of it will be you'll have to launch, at least as a neutralize, if not as a differentiate, a media capability of your own. And MSN is the groundwork of that media, but it's not compelling, right? So you must make it compelling. This is the gradient for making media compelling going forward. Final place is the operational excellence zone. Oops, excuse me. Operational excellence zone. This is an area where it's all we're trying to do again. This is another gradient from being inside the product to being inside the system, if you will, the economic system. So you kind of move from the product to the system as you go down this gradient, and you're taking cost out all the way down the line. This is incredibly important given that we're bringing online on the order of 1 to 2 billion people who can't afford anything that you make today, right? So fundamentally, I mean, the fact you have research centers in Beijing, I don't know, do you have a big center in India? You must. I mean, you'd have, where? Bangalore, big center in Bangalore, okay. We're going to have to design a bunch of stuff there, and it starts with value engineering. Most of the value engineering is in hardware, not in software, although anything that requires maintenance would certainly be part of your value engineering. Anything that requires an install, anything that requires any kind of added value capability to make happen, you'd want to take out. Any friction, think of just removing friction from the process as a kind of your value engineering play. And then integration innovation, which you have been pretty good. I mean, the integration innovation around Office and around Windows, and particularly around Office, that was a very, very powerful economic thing for you to have done. You essentially completely revolutionized the application layer of the PC software business in the early 90s by taking, by taking two products that were pretty decent and one that was horrible, this one right here, and jamming them together and starting the suite business. And of course, over time, this got to be by far the best presentation thing there's ever been, but that wasn't where it started. So integration innovation can be really powerful, particularly for incumbents. If you'll notice what's going on right now in the enterprise, all the incumbents are doing integration innovation. They're all trying to capture and consolidate their layer of the stack. So Cisco's going to integrate the network, and EMC is going to integrate the storage layer. IBM's going to integrate the middleware layer, and SAP is going to integrate the application layer. And what they're doing right now is they're playing this sort of incumbent game. It's a little bit like the Maginot Line in World War I Europe, though. If you're not careful, you will integrate yourself into obsolescence. And it creates, we talked about this just before we were coming over at lunch, about as you do more integration innovation, you create these hairballs, these legacy hairballs, that then become very, very hard to manage and can become inertial sinks for energy, so that you say, I can't roll that thing another revolution. I don't care how good my innovations are. And then you have to start figuring out how to deconstruct these integrated entities into more manageable deconstructed entities. Some of that will be going on, I think, here. Process innovation, in terms of, in your world, the interesting thing about process innovation would be around software development, software tests, regression testing, all that kind of stuff. As we move into the middle of that diagram, everything is legacy. And particularly in the enterprise, in the consumer space, you do have a bit more freedom to throw things away. But in the enterprise, you have no freedom to throw things away. And so the ability to manage legacy at scale intelligently and get a return on it is it's not an uninvented practice. There's some lore, but it's an undeveloped practice. There's a lot of opportunity there, I think, it seems to me, to figure out how do you manage multi-generational, multi-layered pieces of software where the stuff at the bottom is like just, oh my God, there's a BIOS still down there somewhere, and what would you do with it? It's like the organic underpinnings of what looks like civilization on the top. And then finally, value migration innovation, which is something which is very much going on from product to services. You guys, this whole issue of, 4 or 5 years ago, saying, look, I don't know that selling another round of upgrades to Windows or Office is going to work. Could we move people to a subscription model? And then you start thinking, well, can I move people to a more of a services, software as a service model, software on demand model? Maybe it is a media model. You're watching this value migrate. The reason it's important to watch this is as value chains mature, the power position in the value chain or value web moves, right? And so, for example, you guys rose to power because all of the vendors in the early 90s did not understand that the power had moved from hardware to software, okay? But you did. You got it, okay? Well, now it's moving away from software. Oh, shit, right? So where is it going, and how do we stay in touch with that going forward? Because it's not going very far away from software, okay? There's still a lot of software in these other iterations, but it's no longer functionality. I would say that your big claim to fame was functionality and making functionality at scale. Your ability to do scale was absolutely unprecedented for about 15 years until the web. Okay, so Google has figured out to do some things at scale better than you, which should be come to you as a complete and total icy shock. Because you did scale better than everybody always. So now finally somebody's done scale better than you. So, that's what Darwin's for, though, right? That's what it's about, right? Darwin doesn't care. Wake up, your shot, okay? Take a shot, okay, going forward. Couple last slides. So why, people say, why don't we get more traction out of the innovation that you do in companies? And I think of it as a vector math problem. I think that innovation inherently bubbles up, particularly the kinds of innovation that are countercultural. They're not led from the top, they come from the bottom. But if you just leave it at that, and you just say, well, just let this thing work itself out organically, what happens is you get this vector math problem where people very passionate pursuing orthogonal lines of innovation end up to it adding up to zero. And so at some point in this process, the strategic management of the company has to take the resources of innovation and magnetize them and align them with a field and say, we are going to be this kind of company. Now, you are so big that you can have more than one vector going on in a company the size of Microsoft. But you cannot have more than one vector going on in the size of any significant team, because then what happens is you generate way too much noise. Your signal to noise ratio gets way out of whack. You want to have a harmonic. You want to think like a laser. You want to think of sine wave reinforcing sine wave reinforcing sine wave. So whatever the innovation vector is, you want to actually socially agree upon it and then double down and triple down and quadruple down on that vector going forward. That requires a vocabulary, which is the purpose of the book. So the purpose of the book was simply to say, look, I don't know what the vectors are. I don't even know that there are 12 of them, right? I know that there are more than one, right? In fact, the one number I'm pretty sure they're not is 12, okay? But it's a model. So you start there and you make the model better, or you throw it away and find a better model. But you need a vocabulary to have this discussion so that we don't just each personally go inside our head and say, I am inspired, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do something really special. If you do that in isolation, it doesn't matter how special it is, you'll all neutralize each other, right? So you have to have the public social dialogue which says, what the hell are we doing? Okay? And what makes us think that this is the right thing to do? So the model that we talk about and where we spend, this is our consulting practice, but this does not require a consultant, right? It's a three-part process, and it looks like any other analytical synthesis, analysis to synthesis intellectual progression. So you start off by saying what's going on in the world, and there's three issues you really care about. You care about where are we in the life cycle so that I don't use forms of innovation that are inappropriate. And in general, that's why they were lined up along the life cycle the way they were. There's a subset there saying, what do you think we could really be good at? You guys actually have enough of an intellectual footprint that I wouldn't worry a lot about that. I'd worry much more about what do I think the world will reward. And then let's just get good at it. And if we're not good at it, we'll go get somebody who is, right? We'll go get some rock stars, and we'll get. The thing is, in a population this bright, if you put in 2 or 3 rock stars, the rest of the neurons won't line, right? So if you knew which one you wanted, you just go get them, okay? And you've done it in the past, and you're very good at that. And then what are your competitors doing? One of the things that's important about, and this is different from where you've been in the past. In the past, you've gotten onto the same vector as the competitor, and you've taken them out. You've essentially just kind of just drove right over them, okay? Maybe that's the right answer going forward, okay? This model suggests the thing that scares me about that is when I watched IBM and Compaq and HP beat each other bloody, and none of them won. And Dell said, that was great R&D you guys did, thank you very much. And he just did process R&D and took the game away. So I'm getting more sensitive now to saying, don't play a game where your competitor has to play that. That is your competitor's only game. Don't count on you ever differentiating there. Play neutralize against that game, but play differentiate someplace that's open. So that when you do it, because what happens when you do this right is you get a certain distance away from the field, and then the field gives up. The field says, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm not going there because these guys have got too much of a head start, and I can go. It's a 360 compass. Why would I chase them when they have that big a lead? Why don't I just go south instead of north? Then I'll be in the lead, right? Going the other way. Picking a focus, eliminate the inappropriate candidates. That's what the dialogue's for. It's what the model lets you do. Explore the good options and then prioritize one type over all the others. That's hard. That requires diplomacy. It requires will. It requires intellect. It requires leadership. It requires a lot of stuff. But if you don't do it, it's a cop-out. So, I don't think you should say, this is hard, I'm not going to do it. I think you should say, this is hard, we have to do it. How are we going to get it done? What's really powerful is not just when you align around an innovation type for the offer, not just when you get then the field and the marketing and all that stuff aligned, but when the entire institution aligns around it. And everything you do reinforces that harmonic. And you get to a point where, competitors can copy an offer, but they can't copy a company. I mean, that's why Apple is so hard to beat right now, because Apple, or Pixar is another good example. Disney, for God's sake, invented animation, the world's largest distribution, and the only distribution partner of Pixar could not do anything other than buy Pixar and let Jobs take it over, right? Because Pixar was totally harmonic in what it did. I mean, it's just absolutely relentless. Google, prior to this year, was in that state. Google is now in the process of sort of discovering the secondary facts of being Google, which are going to be challenging for it. Its second derivative went negative this week. You saw it, right? It was in the paper, right? That's what the Wall Street was all about. Second derivative, first derivative is positive, second derivative just went negative. Okay? They've never had a negative second derivative, right? So how are they going to deal with it? Okay, we'll see. Now they may rise to the occasion. Okay, they're very bright, they're very competitive, but it is it is kind of annoying to compete against somebody whose first and second derivative are positive because they can make no mistake. Right, and you're just an idiot, right? And by the way, you just have to be patient, until the second derivative goes negative. Pardon?
Bring it on.
Bring it on. Yeah, bring it on. Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Okay, bring it on. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so last slide. This is just a reaffirmation of the first slide, which is the goal in any competitive situation is to create categorical separation so that the customer doesn't have the bargaining power that they would otherwise have. Now, you guys have had some institutionalized separation for a very long time. You were the only operating system, you're the only office system, you're the only email system. So you're very used to having I think actually you've probably gotten complacent in your separation. And I think figuring out how to earn it in the next generation of activities will be harder for you than you might think. Okay. This is, by the way, the website for the book and the website for if you want to send me an email or just anything like that. But we have some time. It's about what's the time situation tomorrow?
Oh, we've got tons of time.
We had tons of time? Okay. Well, I've got there's lots of stuff in the book, but why don't we push back and ask questions or make comments or let's go the other way. I was going fast because I thought we only had about 25 minutes. Yes.
So on the last slide when you talked about moving yourself away so you've got competitive separation, what we see with Windows is we need to separate ourselves from ourselves, right? From how is Vista different than Windows XP? How do you think about that?
I'm sorry. Oh, repeat the question. So the question was, you look at this problem and you say, what happens when we looked at the enemy and it were us, right? So that basically, the thing we're trying to get separation from is our past Windows or past Office, and I'm trying to be the next generation thereof. So in this, there's two plays here. One play is to say, no, you're thinking of the wrong type of innovation. So it would go back and say, you're thinking yellow, you should think blue, okay? Which is to say, don't try to make Vista not Windows, try to make Vista a better Windows, okay? Part of the problem there is we talked about integration innovation and the challenges of a bigger and bigger and bigger and less nimble entity going forward. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is to say, I'm going to create some categorical separation between Vista and Windows. I don't know enough about Vista. So say some words about Vista so I can be more specific. What's it trying to be? Pardon? Okay, so when I saw this.
More simple and easy to use experience, great graphics capabilities, integrated services.
In that case, you would be. You'd be looking at the Starbucks one here, right? Experiential innovation, and so the good news is there's a lot to improve, right? Right. This is right. So we're there. Okay. So the interesting question though becomes, how would you do this? So the guys at a company called IDEO or IDEO. Okay. So they came to fame as sort of a consumer packaged product good design company. They've started a thing at Stanford called the Design School, where they say, if you took the methodology that we use to design consumer products and applied it to any problem, you can get breakthroughs. And so I suspect you're doing it. So there's a fair amount of anthropological, get very, very close to the customer experience of the product and kind of work backwards from there. Other than that, I don't know. I don't need you to be separate from Windows ontologically. I just need the experience to be different. How are you going to deliver that? I don't know. Are you going to be able to be software as a service? Am I going to be able to get you entirely online? Do I need to install software on my PC? That would be a different experience. That's certainly what a bunch of your competitors are thinking about, obviously. Okay. Other questions, please. I don't think I answered that very well. I apologize.
I'm sure you heard about the long tail theory about markets. Where do you think, for Microsoft as a company, long tail would mean trying to spend energy on lower end market shares. Do you think that's an area that Microsoft should look at or just ignore it?
Long tail. So should Microsoft play in the long tail world? only if you had some magnificently leveraged way to do it, right? It doesn't feel to me like where you ought to be. So let me give you a one-person sort of outsider's view of what I would wish you guys would do for the planet going forward. I think there's huge problems on the planet that you guys have not really tackled. You haven't really tackled education. You haven't tackled healthcare. You haven't tackled e-government. You haven't tackled security. You haven't tackled terrorism. Why not? I mean, they're all, and perhaps the answer is because they're all in some ways complex systems. They all sound more like an IBM problem than a Microsoft problem. I got to tell you, there's zero chance IBM's going to solve those problems. Zero. Okay? None. All of those problems have to be solved at scale. The irony of complex systems organizations is they are designed for scale, but they are also trapped by scale. They do not ever come up with the scalable solutions. Scalable solutions always come from the high volume operations organizations, the people that really, really get scale. That's why it's so exciting that Bill is taking on malaria, because there's nobody else on the planet that could beat malaria. Right? You have to beat malaria at scale. So you guys understand scale in some very profound way. Well, education has to happen at scale. It doesn't do any good to have charter schools, because no matter how many charter schools you have, there aren't enough, right? You got to solve it at scale. We're going to get a Darwinian challenge potentially with this avian flu thing. We're going to find out about scale in a very brutal way, right? I would like to be able to head that off a little bit. You guys might be. So I think there's a bunch of stuff for you guys to work on, and the world is moving into your space, right? Virtually, think about how everything's becoming digitized. So it's, for the first time, education is now in your space, right? This is your spot, right? So it's a very powerful place to go. So anyway, that would be what I'd be working about. Yeah.
Thinking about all these different dimensions that you talk about, it feels like it would be great if the market would if any market would nicely split itself into 12 different boxes, and you say, I'm competing with that one. But listening to what you just said and thinking about it, isn't it more likely that there'll be 2 or 3 very broad big markets and then lots of small ones? I mean, you can think about how difficult it is to be a mid-market retailer versus Walmart and high-end stuff.
Right.
And so, I think that. And if you then choose to compete in one of the big areas, you're just going to do exactly that disruptive innovation you were talking about. I mean, if any one of those three companies you were complaining about, suppose they'd said, oh, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to become a niche player. Well, their shareholders might dislike that even more, because suddenly they become an owner 100% of not very much.
So it is problematic. There's a problematic thing about size in business, which says that you get to a certain size in the organic budding strategies, all the ideas that are very attractive for a company, say from 100 million to a billion. You can be lots of very interesting things, but when you're trying to go from 10 billion to 20 or 20 to 40 or 40 to 80, much more problematic. The problem is Darwin doesn't care. We're back to this issue of, so you know what, maybe you have to break up. In other words, if you can't figure out a way to leverage your size, at some point the blue whale was the biggest thing in the ocean, might not have been the most attractive form factor. So you guys have the freedom. You guys have the freedom to disassemble or dissociate or hive off or do whatever. Xbox would be a good example. That's hiving off. We'll see what MSN can do. I would wish MSN would hive off. I think it's not well served by being close to the product models here at Microsoft. This live ops thing's kind of fun. Maybe certainly collaboration's an interesting place to go. But you're right. When you have a big revenue base, particularly from a shareholder's point of view, it's very difficult to see how you can make a shareholder happy. And by the way, none of the gorillas are. Your stock price has been flat for this decade. So is SAP. So is Oracle. So is Intel's. There comes a point where you get to be such a size that you say, look, you're a blue chip stock. You're not a growth stock anymore. So get over it. And I think that by the way, that is one answer. Get over it. Just say, okay, play these blue games. Don't worry as much about the yellow games. Buy the yellow games, and think about what pharma's doing right now. So pharma right now is becoming they can't play the yellow game anymore, right? The drug people can't do it anymore. Every year they spend more and get less. And at some point that actually asymptotically approaches a bad outcome. So basically what they're going to try to do is buy yellow and be blue. I don't think you want to do that. You know, I would encourage you guys to come up with a different structure which allows you to sort of federalize but play at a much more granular level so you can get back into these games. Innovation through acquisition, yeah. So that was, the first people we saw do that really, really well in a growth market was Cisco. Cisco acquired 70, 80, 90 companies in the 90s, of which maybe 6 mattered. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe 7. But they acquired their way into a very powerful place. GE is the most famous acquisition company from the point of view of more mature companies, and GE actually changes its identity through acquisition and divestiture. They kind of it's like taking cars off a train and adding other cars to the train, and pretty soon you've got a train that's taking media and not taking industrial stuff going forward. So the thing about acquisition that I think would be challenging for you is you've never had a culture in the past that respected other companies the way that an acquisition culture has to. Okay? You respect individuals, but you didn't respect companies. And I don't know that you can do an acquisition strategy without a different base. Okay? So the interesting thing about Cisco is that they actually do respect companies. And so that, and I think that's true of GE, although both of those companies put their stamp on something. You cannot, this idea of just merge and we'll just all get along and we'll be like Rodney King, that doesn't work, okay? You have to have an agenda. But I think you will. I mean, you can afford to do it. The really interesting question is, who would acquire you? Right? You ought to ask yourself that question, not from the point of view that anybody will, but from the point of view of saying, who is worthy of acquiring Microsoft? Is there any other company on the planet that if we merged with, the planet would be a different place? Okay? I don't know.
It's not a company.
Well, it might be a country. The U.S. government. Oh boy, that would make the planet a different place, but not a plus. Here and then here. Yeah, here. Go ahead.
You mentioned how in the enterprise space, software doesn't die; it just becomes quote unquote legacy. Can you talk about some strategies to address that problem effectively, not only from the standpoint of cost effectiveness, but for the morale of the people actually doing the work on those legacy products?
Yeah. So the question is, if there's all this legacy, first of all, how do you do it economically? And second of all, how do you maintain human dignity and human value when you say, oh yes, I maintain autocoder, I maintain object code that we've lost the source to, which might be a metaphor for our current foreign policy, but that's a separate issue. So a couple of things. First of all, I've been doing a lot of reading in life sciences recently, and the thing I'm just continually struck by is there was no source code to your body. And your body has so many legacy systems inside it that are kind of like just astoundingly, you would say they're irrelevant, except if I take one out, you die. So, but there's this bizarre way in which your body works. These pathways go. It's just like, you can't believe how absurdly complicated it is. And that's kind of how my vision for enterprise systems is. There's just this mare's nest that nobody really quite completely understands, but it's kind of organic. It's a miracle. It just works. So how would you interact with that? And we actually the book talks a fair amount about this. What you want to do with legacy systems, you want to extract resources from them, because otherwise you're going to be trapped. So we have a model called the 6 levers model. And it says when you have stuff that no longer differentiates, but it's mission critical, so if you took it away, you die, but it's not the key to your success. 6 levers. First lever is centralize it. Second lever is standardize it. Then modularize it. In software, you'd call it usually refactor it. Okay, just like re-architect the software into a systems modular architecture without killing it. then optimize those modules, then instrument the modules, and eventually outsource the modules. And the idea is ultimately to get everything out of the system eventually, to have a complete exhaust system where the legacy never dies, but you can transfer responsibility for it and then repurpose your resources to work on the next stuff. And how you repurpose the resources is a very important piece of this. It's in the last part of this book, which it's probably the part of the book I'm most excited about. How do you re-engage workforces when you do that? So you never ask somebody to cling to this increasingly diminishing returns thing and say, that's my identity. Your identity, once you get past 12 o'clock on this clock, is you are an optimizer. So take whatever it is you're responsible for through the 6 levers. When you got it to outsource, come back and get the next load. By the way, there's an infinite amount of this stuff, so you will have lifetime employment. And if you like optimization problems, and there's optimization problems as a class are a fascinating class of problems, right? They're different from deployment problems, they're different from invention problems, but they all require very innovative thinking. So the idea is to work with it as an optimization problem going forward. Somebody right here, yeah.
I'm a yellow guy.
Yellow?
And I work with a lot of yellow people.
Yep.
And our job is to come up with yellow.
Yep.
But I work in a division, a business that is very blue.
Blue.
And what do we do? Well, oftentimes when we try to come up with yellow, those resources are pulled away from yellow and put into blue.
Yes, particularly toward the end of a quarter. Have you noticed this? There's a timing issue here. So I want to draw something, and I don't know if you can see over here, but I'm going to draw right here. I don't know if you guys. Let's try to draw up here. So this is a diagram we were talking about at lunch, and the problem kind of goes like this. We need to have some new, cool, differentiating stuff. And in our parlance, we call that core, new core. So you're supposed to create some new core. We have a lot of stuff that doesn't differentiate us anymore, but boy, do we have a lot of it. We call that context, right? Now, in terms of money, if it makes a lot of money, we say it's mission critical. If it doesn't make a lot of money, we say it's enabling. All right. Right, enabling. Sounds like it's kind of like one of those California-like words, right? Okay. So you look fairly quickly and you say, Windows, Office. If you're Cisco, you put routers, switches. If you're SAP, you put my SAP, R3 is here, okay? And your name is? Steve. Steve's working on stuff down here. And the company's got all its resources up here. And they've all said, we need new stuff. We need stuff here, right? So invent. So we do. We invent. And then periodically we say, okay, we're ready. And we go up here. There's nobody here. All the people that do mission critical work are over here, trying to make the quarter. In fact, those people we had teed up, we'll have them for you. Just as Steve got up there, boom, they got stuck over there, right? Okay. So as a result, we had the problem is not what happens to large corporations because of their economics. Because, by the way, the illusion of economics is every quarter you're supposed to make more money than the prior quarter, right? It's pretty much the rule, right? So the world runs by sine waves, but we just don't believe in actually the down part of the sine wave, right? So you have this sort of thing getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it sucks more and more resources over here. So your first thought is, well, we just can't invest in innovation at all, but that's not true. It's never true. There's always room for this. But this is the guy that gets stuck. You go up here, I can't get the resources. So what the last 2 chapters of the book are about are saying, I need another color. This is very important. Is there another color? Yes, there's another color over here. You can't do this without color. So it's a little hard to see on this side, by the way. You just have to trust me. This is a good diagram. So the deal is the 6 levers is designed to attack the big hairball. Okay, that's what it's for, and it's designed to deconstruct it, systematically extract resources from it. So when you do that, you free up resources here. You think, well, that's great. I need to invest resources here. And if it's money, you're fine. But if it's people, you're not. Because the people you free up at the end of a life cycle are not the people that you want to hire at the beginning of a new life cycle. And so what has happened is workforces realize what you're doing, and they go, hang on, I'm not going to participate in the wholesale mass firing of my friends. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to kind of slow it down. because I don't like what I see. And so what we realized is, if you don't solve the workforce problem, you need not worry about anything else because it just won't work. And the cool solution that came out of it was to say, look, when you free up resources here, you can't reuse them here, but you can here. That's that optimization. This is the optimization zone. I want optimizers. And by the way, let's bring in rock stars from GE and from places that are good at optimization. That, if I free up this work, that frees up the deployment guys. These are your competitors. This, by the way, this is where Microsoft and Cisco and Oracle and Sun were world class. You guys are just like world class at doing mission critical stuff, right? Just beating it bloody. And if I do that, then I can free up the inventors to come back and do more than this. And when the invention comes up, I got somebody who can take it out. So deconstructing the hairball and getting the resources back here is the problem statement. Yeah.
I'm reading this correctly, then the main statement around that is really process optimization in the context so that you can drive that resource back across into mission critical and then...
Right. It's a three-part... I thought originally it was a two-part problem. I thought it was inventors and optimizers. But I missed the linkage, which was deployers. So optimizers frees up deployers, deployers frees up inventors, okay? It's the way it goes. That way, if you have all those gears turning, the conveyor belt of innovation comes in. And by the way, the implication of this is nothing is forever. I invent it, I deploy it, it becomes... the reason, by the way, it moves from here to here is it got neutralized. It was, in the upper left-hand quadrant, it was kicking butt because it was mission critical and highly differentiated, and the environment figured out a way to neutralize it over time. The way, the Linux system is beginning to neutralize a lot of the advantages of Windows. I don't think by any means all of them. But anyway, as it starts to neutralize, it gets over here. Now I want to push it out, and eventually you push everything out. The implication of this diagram is there's nothing that is permanently Microsoft, ever. They might stay for a long, 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 long time, and it might be permanently on the earth, but not permanently custodianed by Microsoft. Okay, that's the idea. Yeah.
I sometimes despair that we have the will to do what you're suggesting, that there's a lot of time spent on people defending their turf. I often think maybe we should split up, and there will be an Office company, and there'll be a Windows company, and they can spend their time defending their market share and really not doing that much innovation. And then you would have this other company that would be the powerhouse that would be doing the new and unique things in the new and unique ways. But is that even possible of success either? Because you're really depriving yourself of some of those great people in those other areas.
And you're depriving yourself of a huge economic resource. I actually think so the divorcing idea I don't think works. Okay, I think what happens is everybody goes into their room and kind of pouts, and so Xerox would be a great example of that. So the Xerox Park people, Xerox doesn't appreciate us. I don't understand what we're doing, and Xerox is going, God, we pump a lot of money in there, we get nothing out, and so blah 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 blah. He's like Mars, Venus. I mean, okay. So by adding Jupiter to Mars, Venus, I actually think the three-body problem becomes a little more interesting going forward. But your point is still well taken. If I could the strategy I'm working the hardest with CEOs on right now is be careful how you allocate resources. You tend to allocate them by default to revenue. If you allocate resources to revenue, you will get everything stuck on the right-hand side of this diagram. Okay, and then you'll tax it and spend some money in the lower left because you're mostly Republican, but you're a little Democrat, right? But what you'll never get is libertarian. You'll never get this thing to actually invent anything new. And so I'm working on that. I'm also working on leaders rather than allocate leaders, not dollars. Let the leaders fight for the dollars, but first allocate the leaders. This is actually a Colin Powell idea. He said, it's not where you put your troops, it's where you put your generals. The generals will move the troops. But if you try to move your troops and keep all your generals in one place, it doesn't work. So I think moving the leaders and allocating resources by growth opportunity as well as you still need a bunch of resources here. I just don't want them. The politics all happen in this quadrant. This is where all the big guys get all this kind of stuff. And then the final issue is Darwin doesn't care. If you guys go away, the planet doesn't stop, right? So it is voluntary. Maybe one more question, and then we'll be done. Yeah.
It's a really interesting point, I think, is that when you talk about the internal processes across that, I think everybody in the room has probably seen different divisions that do great work from a product standpoint, but maybe haven't married that to the social context that is inside the company. And like I mentioned to you before we started talking, Jeff, I've used your company before in the startup realm, and it helped out a ton. One thing I haven't really seen, though, and it may be included in the Darwin book, is marrying that social context to the product, marketing, etc. Because if you have somebody who's leading up a division or a particular product team that has a charisma to go across from both a technical and a personality standpoint, you can see certain things get driven within the company. Have you married that up to your...
So the place where we talk about it is that, a little, but you actually probably should write another chapter to make it better. The place where we actually talk about it is two places. We say wherever these two zones touch each other, there's the opportunity to screw up the handoff, right? So classically, deployers don't like to let go of anything. So the optimizers come in to optimize, and the deployers say, over my dead body, you can't have this thing, right? So that requires executive intervention there. The opposite problem is on this side. Inventors think things are done when they're barely compiled, right? and so you have this sort of like, whee, this thing like thrown out into the world, right? And so that the handoff is like, no, come back here. And so we invented the concept called, inventor says it's done, deployer says it's done. We invented the word done. So done means the inventor thinks it's done and the deployer thinks it's done. Until it's not done, it's not done. Well, listen, you guys have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks.